Hi everyone, here we are on a snowy Monday, the end of week 4. Oh, actually the sun's starting to come out, that would be nice. Um, I hope you're all happily either at least warm in a snowed in kind of state right now. Um, I think we're a stable kind of class right now, and I've removed the people who appear to have dropped the course from our weekly groupings, and we have the new people who've come in. So I think we're in a position now to kind of move on and and help our class COP become more cohesive with time. Because one of the things that about a COP is that it develops, right? It evolves, and I think so. I don't see classes. I think only some classes can actually become COPs. And I don't assume that they all are at all, but I think that if we think about them, if we think about our course as being a COP, and we think about bringing our understandings, relating those to our practices, bringing those back and forth, and talking about the ideas that we read about in the course in relation to those practices, that over time we will it helps our class become we share more of these ideas together, and we are able to kind of build on them together, and we have this common interest in in the areas of teaching and second language learning and literacies and technology, and we can, by reflecting on on those, we develop this kind of shared domain of knowledge. So everybody also should have received feedback on their first assignment. Sorry, I sound like this, but I'm sick, as you can probably tell. Yeah, so everybody should have a feedback note here, which is visible to them and to them alone. And let me know if you have any questions about anything I said in there, or if you're concerned at all. And if you don't see your name one week in a group, if I've somehow left you off, let me know and I'll put you in, because I sometimes do that accidentally. I want to thank Laura and Daniel for moderating this week's discussion, our discussion on multimodalities. And I thought there was some very good comments today. You raised interesting issues. And I notice that it's one thing is different to me in teaching about technology in the language and literacies contexts, as opposed to the computer mediated contexts, or even theories of learning, which are my other courses that I teach. Is that there really is a very existing large body of research and theory around effective instructional practices with language learning and also with literacy. And language learning has long had the call literature as part of it, and which has been a very technology-oriented set of literatures. But when we first focus more on the technologies, these, I think, practices really are still very much developing, and particularly when we look at new technologies as well. And I think first we have to, before we can get to best practices, we have to observe how students learn and how they, with these new technologies, how they learn over time, what does that look like. So there is really a big kind of requirement for yet more research on, particularly on these on the impact of these new technologies, and where do they help literacy develop, and because we already know a lot about how literacy develops, and how does it work in this kind of environment. And also it's important to keep in mind that along with the kind of technology-related practices that we talk about, there's another kind of theory of learning that gets kind of snuck in there and that isn't always talked about, and that's a constructivist way of learning, which is much more student-centered and assumes active learning, and that, it's very consistent with literacy as making meaning. But it's also very different from a kind of more behavioral model of learning that actually informed some of the early call literature and some of the early computer-assisted learning kind of literature broadly outside of language learning. So there's been a kind of shift in there. And this course is an example of a kind of constructivist use of educational technologies, because it's very much guided by your work and your questions, and I try to facilitate and move things along, but I give you a lot of space to develop voice and to really think about your own understandings of these ideas. But thinking about multimodalities in broad strokes, as including, for example, the kinds of learning that Laura talks about in her summary note here, which is really very nice, which nicely contextualizes some of the ideas we were discussing this week. So she's looking at teaching this adult ed and literacy and basic skills course, and there's a lot of rich sort of activities, and it's very multifaceted way of thinking about all the different kinds of modes that we encounter when we're learning something, because all of our learning, all of our daily activity is embedded in understanding everything around us, and how to use it. So I think that gives a sort of authenticity to those practices. And when things are more authentic, I think they're easier to learn and to retain, and they connect in multiple ways with those students' lives. And so I think that is also why that's very effective. I think after sort of reading the notes for this week, it's also very clear that people are pretty much in agreement that that pedagogy, andragogy, whatever teaching practices do shape and determine how technology use is meaningful in that particular context. So it's not the technology in and of itself. Technologies may allow you to do certain things more than others, which we'll look at this week when we talk about synchronous and asynchronous. But essentially, it's how it's integrated and framed within the overall teaching and learning kind of structure that the teacher develops, that and as opposed to this technological imperative of having kind of computer technologies involved all the time, and instead we're using it with clear intent and for specific kinds of learning goals, and that's really what we want to develop over time, is a clearer, larger set of those practices, and when is it useful, and for what kinds of purposes, and with whom. I think Daniel's summary brought out an important point about participation, that sometimes new technologies are motivating and they can provide opportunities for different learners to engage, and I think that is a really nice kind of feature about about new technologies. But we're a long way from clarity around these issues, but I think there's a lot of potential. So the sorts of things like digital storytelling and all kinds of interesting, developing a strong sense of identity, having different learners being able to use more arts-based kinds of technologies to create different sorts of media productions, that we don't just have to have an essay as a final outcome. We could have something that in a different visual form. I think that I think the new technologies do open up possibilities for this, and again, it's like, and how does it work for whom, when, under what circumstances? So it's quite complex, and I don't think we'll ever get to a kind of really quick sort of set of checklist things about, well, I should do this here and that there. I do think that teachers, you can get some broad strokes, but you really have to sort of work it out as you go. And so this is very emergent, I think, a lot of this research and a lot of these ideas, particularly when it comes to applying to teaching. Faith and, where are we here? Let me go back to this coming week. So we're going to go, as I was saying before, into looking at asynchronous and synchronous tools and how they may, what they might help with in these contexts for learning in both language and literacies education. And Faith and Rebecca have set up some interesting things for us to do. And one of them is actually to do this practice activity. So there's some different tools, and you can work with other people to do this, and have a practice. See what you think. And if you can work with somebody else in the class, because don't forget we've got our people's contacts in our here in the course admin. People have got their email addresses. Hopefully, yep. Most people have. So you could always set up a time to just do it with one other person in the class. And I think that's a nice way to make it a little bit more cohesive. And if it's just one other person, you might be able to figure out how to, a good time to connect. Because it's always difficult trying to get, the more people you have, the harder it is. But if you just tried it with one other person, you might actually get to know another person in the class a little more, which would be nice. And then so you can sign up here. Now, it doesn't mean that only 2 people can do these things. Those were just numbers, and it's a class editable note. So if 3 people want to do VoiceThread or more, that's fine. Or you can, a whole bunch of people, but you could do it in pairs. So that whatever works. But I think it is nice to practice these things and to try them out so they have a bit more reality. Let's see. So just a little bit of word about temporality with synchronous and asynchronous. It used to be that temporality, this is sort of communication that happens sort of pretty simultaneously, and this is communication asynchronous that happens, in over time and not all at once. Those divisions really don't hold up anymore either quite so simply. So, for instance, in our text messaging function that we have here, if you send messages, you could, if somebody's online, and of course you know that people are online because, look, Vicky's online right now as I'm making this video. You can talk to somebody and message them, back and forth if they happen to be online, or if they happen to have used their notifications and set that up, which you have, right? You all know what notifications are here under preferences. Make sure you do fill those out because they're quite handy. But so if people happen to be online at the same time, that's also true for asynchronous, what are normally considered asynchronous notes. If I was working in a particular view, and let's say Vicky was also writing a note at the same time, and she saved hers, I could actually be writing. We could be communicating almost synchronously in the online discussion if it just happened that we were online at that time. So time has become a little bit more blurred with these sorts of tools, but it's still, it still does vary. It still makes profound changes for the experience, I think. And I think synchronous is helpful for some things and less so for others, and asynchronous the other, similarly, but for different things. So if you have a few experiences this week, and see what you think, and and tell us about that in your notes for the upcoming week. I think that's it. Okay, so I hope you have a nice week, and that you stay warm and don't get snowed under, and I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.